Hola, buenos días. Lo primero, gracias por estar con nosotros en esta sesión de oficinas, de extracción de valor en oficinas, sobre todo a través de Capex y de estrategias de ocupación. Os voy a presentar brevemente a mis panelistas. Tenéis en el centro a Charlie Green. Charlie, I will do that in English, so you can correct me if I say something wrong. Charlie co-founded the Office Group in 2003. He's a traditionally real estate background professional. He was exposed to the office sector, and he had this vision of creating office spaces which was more focused on how people use the space, more design-led, more simple, greener. This is something that is very popular today and very obvious, but it was not so much so in 2003. So he was a visionary back then. The Office Group has now 1.6 million square feet in London, and it's still growing, and it's now a part of the Blackstone Group, so like many others. But his views in this panel would be very, very interesting from that side. Next to Charlie, to your right, we have Tina Pellier. Tina is here today as the chair of the RSCS Europe board. She's holding at the moment her tenure and is mainly focused in preparing the profession for the PropTech revolution. Aside from her RSCS role, Tina is a very senior executive at Generali, where she is global head of projects and technology. She has a very wide CV, so I will not go over it. I think the most important point is that Tina has held many positions in many geographical areas, in almost all the uses, many disciplines. So she's a very wide professional, and she's an architect, but has had very strong training also in business administration. And last but not least, we have Luis. A Luis le presento en castellano. Luis es director general del área inmobiliaria corporativa de Mapfre. Es doctor arquitecto por la Universidad Politécnica, por la UPM. Tiene un MBA en gestión internacional y otro en dirección de empresas inmobiliarias. Luis además ha sido conferenciante en varios cursos de posgrado y doctorado en varias universidades americanas. Y profesionalmente ha desarrollado la mayoría de su carrera en el grupo Mapfre, antes también en empresas dentro del grupo BBVA, como Iberdrola o Metrovacesa, siempre en posiciones de dirección general. So as you can see, a very top-level panel. We had breakfast before. We were discussing everything that we wanted to actually talk about. We would need 8 hours to discuss everything that we raised in that table. So we will try and keep it as short as possible and go mainly to the main topics that we believe can be of your interest. Of course, please feel free to launch your questions while we are talking. I will give just a very short introduction because I want the panelists to give you your views. I think it's an overstatement now because all of us know that already, but our occupancy world is changing very much. So occupiers, they don't understand the space they occupy as a container anymore. They understand it as a major piece of their value chain. That means it helps them attract and retain talent. It helps them in their consolidate their image. It helps them transmit their values. That is that for them, space is not a cost only anymore. It's also an investment. And that investment is in areas such as marketing or HR. These occupiers give much more space to the value they are in. And these people, they do not speak about square meters or rents or service charges only. They do speak about that, but not only. There are new words, no? They talk about service, they talk about flexibility, sustainability, representativity. And I think a lot of developers are embracing all of these trends in the product that they're releasing to the market, but we need to also understand how to retrofit all of these in existing buildings. No? So I think Luis will tell us a very interesting example on how to do that. So in order to attract these high-value occupiers, we need to adapt both the hardware and the software. No? The hardware will be the building, so we need to put Capex in it. And the software will be the services that we offer in our building in order to keep these occupiers there. So I think without much more introduction, Charlie, maybe you are in direct and daily touch with all of these occupiers. Your job is to actually attract them and retain them in your spaces. So why don't you tell us a bit what it is that you do at the Office Group, and how have you seen this occupier world evolve throughout the years, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so it's extraordinary the change that we're seeing in the market today. I think when we set our business up in 2003, we did it to challenge two markets. We did it to challenge the serviced office market, which was the old Regus model, and we did it to challenge the traditional office market, because we looked and we saw that people used to use serviced offices for short-term temporary space, and we felt that actually that environment was not conducive to anything other than short-term space. But if you created a product that was better value, that was better designed, that was more considered, then actually why shouldn't you create something that a product that people stayed? And yes, they have flexibility, but that's not really the driver. The flexibility was always a comfort. Every company wants flexibility, but for our business, our ambition was to create something that people wanted to, create an environment where people wanted to stay, and that was therefore creating long-term income with a short-term infrastructure. We set out, when we started the business, to buy buildings because we are from a real estate background, and we felt that if we owned the asset, that gave us greater control, both financially and over the physical offer that we could create. And I think, coming from a traditional real estate background, our view is that we have always seen in the real estate markets either a landlord market or a tenant market. And those have been driven by macro or bigger economic factors that dictate whether it's supply and demand. And depending on which cycle you hit, you had a good deal of taking an office space in terms of rent, but at some point it might catch up with you and you get hit at a rent review, certainly in the UK market. And I think that those landlord markets and those tenant markets are now disappearing. And the change is that it's now a tenant market. And the entire focus, and I'm not sure that's going to shift again. I think now occupiers are actually dictating the changes that we're seeing in this market. And the changes are therefore a response to what the occupier wants. And we're realizing, in many ways, the office sector has been the last forgotten sector to react to these changes. So we've seen it in hotels, we've seen it in the leisure sector, restaurants, we're seeing it in residential as well. But offices have never really been designed to really understand how an occupier uses that space, and that's the change. Because if you don't respond to those needs, you will not have an occupier. And that change, I think, is brought about by technology. And technology not in the sense of intelligent buildings and smart buildings, but I think that is coming. We're going to talk about that more. But technology in the sense that it's changing our behavior, it's changing our expectations, our need for immediacy and speed. And therefore, it's also changing our knowledge and our access to information. So as occupiers who can now go onto Google to find their office space, and who can go onto Pinterest and Instagram and understand that through social media that there is a different kind of environment for them to work in that responds to their needs, then they will vote with their feet, and they will be attracted to the environments where the operator can respond to that. And you have a traditional landlord who struggles to make that leap to understanding what that user wants. And it's about a number of different factors. It's about design, for certain. It's about a level of service, which I think traditionally the real estate market has been poor at delivering that level of service and delivering a relationship that truly engages with the occupier. And occupiers are saying, I want that. And if you're not prepared to give it to me, I'm going to go somewhere else that will. And I think for our business and our sector, we represent one end of the market, but I think those elements that are affecting that behavior change and how the occupier wants their space, that's affecting every occupier, whether it's a large corporate taking 50,000 square meters or a startup. Everybody wants something that's more responsive to their needs. And this change, I think we're just seeing the very beginning of it. We're perhaps the clearest expression of it at our end, and co-working, which is only a part of our business, is even further as an extreme response to it. But the entire industry really does need to address the occupier and put that user experience. We're very comfortable talking about user experience in a tech frame, and I think that user experience has to be the prime concern when we're delivering real estate, whether we own the asset and we own a quarter of our portfolio, but we lease our assets as well. It doesn't really matter for us. However, whatever our interest is, we have to have that real estate approach, understanding what we have, what is our asset, the bricks and mortar of that asset, and then responding to the user and saying, I'm going to adapt my bricks and mortar to suit your needs. Is that 5 minutes?
That was perfect.
You have to be.
From your side, Tina, I think there's a big challenge. Tina, as I told you, is the chair of the RSCS. I think most of you know what the RSCS is, but just in case, so RSCS is, and I have here the words because I don't want to define it improperly, but it's the worldwide largest professional association providing qualification and standards for the real estate sector. It has at the moment more than 125,000 people in the association. And I think one of the big challenges that the RSCS is facing at the moment is how to impact in value all of this disruption. So what happens to the value of buildings, or how do we implement that when we have this big change in the way we occupy buildings, in the way we structure the leases? So what is it that you do at RSCS, Tina, and how are you addressing all of that?
All right, thanks, Anna. That's I think before I get into how we're addressing it, I'd like to give a few statistics on the flexible workspace or co-working or workspace as a service. There's many names for it. I think just to facilitate it, we're going to call it flexible workspace.
That works.
I've just decided.
No, it's good. It's good. I'll use it.
We could call it the office group, but that wouldn't work. So flexible workspace has been growing. Obviously, ex Regus, has been here for a long time. But this new set of flexible workspace operators basically started in around 2010, and started in the U.S. In 2014, moved to London. And so those are areas, and probably starting in 2014, but more of 15, 16, started moving towards continental Europe, and even more recently here in Barcelona. So the sort of statistics that are the most easy to grasp are the ones coming from the markets that have had a few more years of experience with this phenomena of what we're calling flexible workspace, this new type of flexible workspace operator. So if you look at the US over the gateway markets, currently 1% of total office inventory is used by some sort of flexible workspace operator. That is set to triple in size, and most of the key markets, most of the gateway markets will probably grow to 5 to 10% of flexible workspace. So you can see there's a huge amount of growth that can still happen in the US. In London, where flexible workspace has been really coming of an age since 2014. In the last 5 quarters, up to quarter one, including quarter one 2018, you've got London flexible workspace take up 217,000 square meters. You've got Paris, 126,000 square meters. Berlin, 81,000 square meters. And Barcelona, 17,000 square meters. So this is where you can see it's heading. The wave is moving. London, basically, workspace as a service or flexible workspace in Europe, 7.5% take up. The take-up of all commercial office space, 7.5% in Q1 2018, was flexible workspace operators. And that's 3 times higher than it was in 2016. So you can see that this is a phenomena, it's a trend, and is not ready to disappear, and for a number of reasons, I think. We believe at the RICS that this movement is here to stay, because it's driven by largely by technology on the one hand, and the customer user experience on the other hand. So since it's here to stay, some of the interesting things are how is the RICS adapting and transforming and working with our members on how do we deal with this change, which I think is probably one of the most heavily disruptive forces that commercial real estate will be seeing over this upcoming period. I think, institutional investors are looking to offer flexible space. 77% polled by CBRE. They have a poll that they do with their institutional investor base. There's over 110 investors and that respond to this investor base. 77% are looking to offer some form of flexible workspace within their portfolios. So this is a huge movement. Now, the RICS recognized that one of the aspects of this flexible workspace was the service, was the added value that basically these providers were becoming more than providers of real estate. They were becoming curators of experience. They were becoming community engagement facilitators. They were becoming events managers. They were also, and I think at the lowest common denominator, becoming a concierge service where, you no longer come to the office because you have to come to the office to work. No one has to come to the office to work anymore. That's easy. You can work from anywhere with technology. So you have to make people want to come to the office. So there has to be things going on. There has to be that buzz. And who's creating that on the ground? And I think what Charlie was talking about earlier is the difficulty that the traditional real estate sector has had to embrace these changes. And so one of the things the RICS did, recognizing that this service aspect was really, really key, in 2017 we launched a landmark collaboration with the International Facility Managers Association. And IFMA, which is the acronym for International Facility Management Association, which I will use to go shorter. IFMA and the RICS are looking to transform this $1 trillion global facilities management industry. We think that there is one compelling pathway to creating facility management as being effective, because facilities managers are there to not only do the multi-technical role that we know them of, those that are fixing things that break down, but they're there also to improve productivity, generate cost savings through energy efficiencies, and promote employee well-being. So, all of that is part of this launch with IFMA to transform the facilities management industry and performing all sorts of training sessions and positioning papers and thought-provoking work on how do we reposition facilities managers, long time seen as really a simple sort of technical backup for when things go bad in the building. It's no longer that. I think facilities management obviously can go way beyond. So that's one of the ways that the RICS has been adapting to this change and is preparing their membership by bringing in and training up and bringing to a strategic level facilities management. The other topic that, Anna, you asked me to talk about was valuation. And I don't know how many investors are out there. Can the real estate investors or developers raise their hands? Aha, okay, we've got a few there. Who has not asked themselves, if I put a flexible workspace operator in my building, how much would that create value or lose value? Will I be able to get my bank to underwrite my building at the value that I think it has? These are questions which are really key, because we need to understand what the value of a workspace, a flexible workspace operator, what value that brings to a building. And one thing that can be said is that the flexible workspace operator microcosm is growing very fast. There's a lot of new players coming on board because there are very low barriers to entry. There's no real legislation. You don't have to have a special planning permit to put a workspace into an office space, flexible workspace. You don't need a special license. The fit-outs are quite typical. They're upgrade office fit-out, but there's no real specificity. You don't have to have a certification to become a flexible workspace operator. So how do you value those businesses? This is a question that the RICS is looking into, and we're working on a specific paper because today valuations are anywhere from lenders who tend to value at the most prudent level at vacant possession value. And most investors will say, well, if you're going to be valuing it at vacant possession, why would I bring an operator into my building? I'm going to be losing value. So these are questions that we need to answer, and we need to provide a framework for how to best value what we consider as like a going concern in real estate. And since there's very little empirical evidence on basically, what are the comps? How much do these buildings, if a building has flexible workspace in it, does it sell for more or less the same as a building very similar, comparable, that does not have flexible workspace? And I don't know if we can pull it up, I've got an interesting graph.
I don't know if... there's a graph?
There's a slide with a chart, no? Anyway. No problems. I can talk without the slide, and I think I'm almost up with my 5 minutes. But
is it this one?
Yes, there it is. There it is. So this was a study that was carried out by one of Anna's competitors on.
It's forbidden to say the name.
On buildings in the U.S. 17 buildings that were traded in the U.S. between 2016 and 2018. And how much co-working space, they're calling it co-working or flexible workspace, is in the building, and how did it trade in comparison to buildings that did not have this element in it. And very interestingly, you will see that if there is somewhere between 10, 15, up to 30% of flexible workspace in a building, it seems to be creating value. The cap rates are lower than comparable buildings without. And then when you get to in excess of 40%, you start seeing that cap rates increase disproportionately, and you see value, basically value dropping. And that's, a historical reference. It's one of the few historical references that we have. So working with some comparables and trying to extrapolate from those, and working on how do we value a going concern of a business such as Charlie's, which, has their operations, their retention rates, their occupation rates. There's all sorts of things to look at. It's almost like looking at a hotel. Very similar to the hotel industry. So that's what we're going to be working on with the RICS.
Thank you, Tina. And I think Luis now can give us a very practical example of everything that we're discussing. So we're talking today about occupational strategies, that's flex space, co-working, all kinds of lease models. And we have the hardware, so this Capex side. And Luis has here in Barcelona what we believe is one of the best examples in Spain of adapting an existing building to this new trend, to these new occupiers, both from the outside and the inside. So maybe you can explain us a bit, Luis, what it is that you did there?
Sí. Bueno, voy a darlo en español al final.
Claro.
Voy a darlo en español. Bueno, la torre tenía 25 años en 2017 y tenía algunos requerimientos técnicos que debían ser cambiados forzosamente, como era el sistema de aire acondicionado, que tenía RU22 y era un sistema abierto y había que pasarlo a un sistema VRV. Los ascensores, que son de doble cabina, necesitaban un control de destino, una mejora de la cabina, había que cambiar los variadores de frecuencia, y finalmente la torre requería algo que no tenía, que era el suelo técnico. Entonces, cuando nos planteamos el reformar estas tres cosas que eran requerimientos técnicos, ya dijimos, bueno, pues vamos a intentar hacer un reposicionamiento, porque ya metidos en gastos y ya que hay que empantanar la torre con los inquilinos dentro, pues ya que lo hacemos vamos a hacer algo más, ¿no? Por aquello del aniversario que parece que tocaba. Y entonces, bueno, hicimos algunas cosas más, como nuevos servicios, nuevas áreas para networking, falso techo metálico, tecnología LED, viene ahí algunas de las prestaciones en la transparencia que no voy a repetir, el rediseño de la fachada del cuerpo bajo, lo que es el basamento, poner vestuarios para la gente que viene en bici o que hace deporte a mediodía. Había una demanda estructural que conocíamos en Barcelona de unos 150.000 metros para empresas tecnológicas y startup. Muchas veces la demanda no tenía cabida en la torre porque había más metraje del que teníamos disponible. Claro, hacer esta reforma técnica con inquilinos dentro tiene su aquel, es decir, porque tienes que ir moviéndolos de un sitio a otro y hay inquilinos que son inamovibles, o sea, el consulado alemán, only one way, no nos movemos, es decir, no choice para determinados inquilinos, ¿no? Bueno, eso es desde el punto de vista de los aspectos técnicos, no repito los de la transparencia. Bueno, ahora la torre ya se ha reformado, tiene doble altura en algunos de los espacios. Aspectos financieros, que son los que al final mandan, ¿no? Básicamente la tasa interna de retorno tiene que ser mayor que el coste medio de capital. Para los que no sean economistas, la rentabilidad de las operaciones tiene que ser mayor que los recursos que las financian. Eso traducido, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el punto del break-even? Porque claro, entre el periodo de construcción, el periodo de marketing, las carencias y los alquileres, pues al final te vas a 4 años. Entre muertos y heridos, ese periodo afecta no a toda la torre, pero sí a parte de la torre, ¿no? ¿Ese incremento de rentas es suficiente para sustentar la deuda en el caso de que el inversor lo hiciera con deuda? No es nuestro caso, nosotros lo hacemos con fondos propios, pero muchas veces ese incremento de rentas tiene que sostener el incremento de deuda si el propietario lo tiene que hacer con deuda. ¿Cómo afecta esa reposición al valor del inmueble? Porque claro, si lo haces con deuda tienes un problema de LTV, del loan to value. Entonces, si el crédito afecta al loan to value positiva o negativamente y si tienes capacidad de repago de esa deuda, es decir, cuáles son los exit cap rates que pueden subir, en cuyo caso te hacen polvo porque el valor baja y el loan to value sube, y cuáles son las rentas obtenidas. Muchas veces es un mix de ambas cosas, subes las rentas, pero si te sube el exit cap, pues resulta que te quedas igual, y entonces el valor sigue siendo el mismo. Hombre, el escenario maravilloso sería, suben rentas, baja el exit cap, sube el valor del inmueble y si tengo deuda, el porcentaje de deuda me baja y el coste de la deuda me baja. Eso no es el caso de mi compañía porque, insisto, no operamos con deuda, pero es el caso general en el que alguien se apalanca en eso, ¿no? La ventaja es, el objetivo, perdón, es batir al mercado. Si el mercado sube un 10% anual las rentas, el objetivo es que cualquier edificio que tenga revalorización por Capex o nuevas rentas bata al mercado. Porque si el edificio que tienes tal como está, suben las rentas sin más, también es cierto que un edificio al que no le metes Capex suficiente, lo que pasa es que pierde liquidez. A lo mejor se alquila, pero más tarde o tarda más en alquilarse, ¿no? Aspectos financieros, bueno, en el caso nuestro, el Capex Investment ha sido el 12% del valor actual de la torre, no del valor en libros, que es mucho más bajo. Las rentas han subido como un 20% en los nuevos contratos para nuevos inquilinos. El yield expectante sobre el valor de mercado está en torno al 4,5%, y lo que estamos haciendo es mejorar servicios manteniendo el mismo nivel de gastos que teníamos en la torre, es decir, a los mismos 6 euros por metro cuadrado y mes se consigue incrementar el número de servicios. Y ya para acabar, bueno, pues de media, el take-up period, el periodo de arrendamiento está siendo aproximadamente desde que empiezas la reforma en una planta hasta que la acabas y lo alquilas, es como un año. Claro, como eso no lo haces todo de golpe, pues al final el periodo, con los free rent periods y tal, pues te vas al final a 3-4 años. La superficie disponible ahora mismo de las plantas renovadas es solo del 1%. O sea, plantas renovadas disponibles no alquiladas solo estamos en el 1%. Las plantas que están siendo reformadas y bajo negociación, es decir, durante el periodo de reforma ya comercializas, el 11,4%. Y la superficie no disponible para alquilarse hasta que sea renovada está en el 7,28%. Es decir, La torre en el fondo tiene 19 puntos no alquilados, solo tiene el 81, pero por distintas razones, algunas no están todavía reformadas, otras están en reforma y las ya reformadas solo son el 1%. Bueno, y yo creo que más o menos cumplo los tiempos, ¿no?
Perfecto,
sí,
perfecto.
no tengo el IVA. Luego intentaremos hablar de...
amenaza.
No, luego intentaremos hablar de nuevos modelos de ciudad,
Sí,
si es el caso, y nuevas tecnologías, porque la alternativa aquí es meterle Capex a un edificio o método americano, que es lo demolemos y hacemos uno nuevo, que muchas veces no es posible si un edificio tiene limitaciones de altura, lo digo, no es el caso de la torre, pero tiene limitaciones de altura libre entre plantas o sobrecarga de forjado, eso es insoslayable. Si tú no tienes altura libre suficiente o no tienes sobrecargas que te permita la ordenanza, es que compensa tirar el edificio y hacerlo nuevo. Eso lo ha hecho Colonial, me parece, en Madrid, en alguno. Compra un edificio, se pone a hacerlo y al final dice, oye, mira, lo tiramos y lo hacemos nuevo, porque el Capex no es posible siempre. En edificios modernos de alta tecnología o de hace 20 años sí es posible, pero hay edificios en los que no merece la pena el Capex. Eso es una de las cosas que hay que decidir y que, sobre todo, posibilitan un nuevo modelo de ciudad. Londres está haciendo proyectos muy relevantes, fuera incluso de ordenanza, negociados con el ayuntamiento, pero son proyectos realmente interesantes desde el punto de vista técnico.
Sí. I think we've seen from the several arguments that we heard from our panelists, what we're seeing is that we're having a lot of new entries to our traditional sector, people and groups who do not necessarily have a real estate background, a lot of digital people who are pushing us, all the traditional ones, a bit out of our comfort zone. And I don't know, how do you think this is going to change our marketplace? So are these kind of profiles enriching our market? Is it a threat to our traditional way of doing business? How do you see these new entries reshaping our market? Anything?
Well, you know, the last 2-3 years have seen such a vast number of new entrants coming in, and I think, you know, a lot of them are looking at the real estate as this global asset class that is ripe for change because it hasn't changed for so long. It's been, you know, rigid for so long, and so, you know, technology will certainly play a role in that, and digital entrepreneurs will come and look to WeWork's valuation, and they'll think, well, if I can get some of that, then I'll be happy. So, you know, we're seen as this sort of beacon in kind of the world where everybody's looking for the next Uber, the next Airbnb. It's such a common pursuit that actually real estate, because of WeWork, now everybody's saying, I'm gonna have a go at this. And as Tina said, the barriers to entry are low. But the reality is that you know, this is an operationally intensive business that has to rely on real estate knowledge to be successful, in our view. And I think that a lot of these operators are coming into the market at the very top of the market, looking to pay, having to pay, the highest rents that we've seen, and I can only speak of London, the highest rents that we've seen in London are being achieved today, and in large part they're being achieved by new entrants coming into our market. And the reality is that that is a missed opportunity for the real estate industry. Because if you own your asset and your cost, your rent equivalent cost sits below your EBITDA line, then you're at such a huge competitive advantage if you can deploy the right resources to invest into creating this operational business that has to understand its audience, that has to understand marketing and digital channels and brand, and has to understand its audience, then the real estate industry, the owners of assets, should be making that leap into this sector, not new entrants coming in. We have to embrace technology. We have to invest in it. We have to, I think our biggest challenge with technology is understanding what is relevant and what is not relevant, because it's very expensive to invest in it. So that's something that I think we'll continue to learn and evolve as an industry, because it's all so new for us, and we're trying to understand the problems that we have to find the technology to give us the solutions, and then you have to deploy it in the right way. It's a challenge. But if the real estate industry can understand that, but it's tough. And I kind of would say this, but as an operational business that's been doing it for 15 years, I think what you're going to see is many more partnerships where landlords are saying, okay, I don't want to invest in setting that up. It is high risk. It's deeply competitive. I'm going to partner with existing operators, and I'm going to share. Because if you think about it, if I'm able to pay a market rent on an office building, and because how I design my space and the level of service that I provide, I'm able to charge more and make a margin. Well, actually, if I really believe what I talk about, which is that this is a real estate play, why aren't real estate owners doing that? But it's complex. So I think that the partnerships where real estate owners can mitigate their risk to some extent, but share in the upside, share in the higher revenue that we can generate from the asset, and that's another conversation how we do that. I'm not sure I want to say that, but then I think that, it's such an interesting, exciting time for real estate to make those changes. You will, of course, have new entrants come in, and those new entrants will bring something rich and interesting that real estate can't. But I do think that the opportunity is there for real estate.
It's huge, yeah.
Huge.
So maybe I'll jump in as well and add on to that. I mean, I fully agree, Charlie, with what you're saying about the opportunity being vast. And there are a lot of new players coming in, and they are coming from different fields. But I actually think that diversity also is very healthy for this industry that has been sort of the industry that has been traditional for so many years and has been lagging behind the transformations of a number of the other industries, major industries in the world, and that it's ripe for change. And I think that coming back to that service-orientated offering, I think that the facilities managers, property managers of today, or office space, workspace managers need to take lessons from the hospitality sector. And more in the buildings that I manage, we're actually looking for facilities managers, property managers that actually are recruited out of the hospitality sector, because we feel that there is a real value add there. Now, of course, Charlie, I'm not going to say the technical side is important, the understanding of the real estate is important, but I think to your point about putting customer first and understanding what the end user wants, I think lessons learned from other sectors, whether it be technology or hospitality or even beyond that, are well worth taking a step back and listening to.
For sure. Real estate is the platform. You've got to get that foundation right. We see ourselves as being in the hospitality industry. It's not recruiting people. We do recruit people from the hotel world. We love them. We think they're brilliant. But that's where we position ourselves. That's front and center. What is the experience? What's the level of service that we're delivering to the occupier? But we have to understand. So one of the things that we do is we individually design every building, because I think that real estate knowledge means that we understand architecture, we understand location, we understand the audience, we understand relationships within the real estate world, we understand planning, and that allows us to therefore build a building in East London that is different to a building in the West End of London, because we're targeting very different audiences. And so with all of these elements and services that you layer on, the fundamentals have got to be right. If you don't get it right, then you're going to create, we don't do, and others do in our sector, just a one-star-fits-all, whether it's in Dubai or New York, it's the same offer. I don't believe that works. And I think that contradicts the fundamentals of real estate. I'm done.
No, yeah. That's true, but probably the market in London or in Paris is more liquidity than here in Spain, in Madrid and Barcelona. So the total square meter in Spain in these two cities are 80 million square meters, and that's true also that the market is stressed with this new sector. But on the other hand, we don't know if we are creating a bubble in because the prices are speeding up very, very quickly, and I don't know what will be the final effect in the Spanish market, because that's true that in London the share of this new subsector is 20% of the total market, roughly more or less. But here in Spain, the problem is that the market is now so liquidity, and there is a delay in the marketing of this product, according with the developing of this subsector in London. But the issue, the final point, the thing is, what will be the market share of this subsector in Madrid or in Barcelona? You know, because don't forget that there is a problem of scale. The market is higher, much higher in London or in Paris, and the liquidity of the market is like this. And the stock exchange of Madrid, so the volume of business is only the volume of one day in New York. So it's not the same in the real estate market, but we have to compare the different scales of the market and the speed up of this process. Because in Spain, we are not lazy, but we are late, you know?
Maybe I can react to that, because I threw out the number that some of the gateway cities would probably be 5 to 10% of flexible workspace at maturity, and I think you know, markets are smaller, but I think major gateway cities like Barcelona, like Madrid, are cities that will also follow this trend. And I think the most important thing is that once you have global tenants, you have tenants that are worldwide office occupiers, and when they start tasting the service that they get from these serviced office flexible workspaces, they start wanting it wherever they go, and they start expecting it. And I think this will be driven by the tenant. I think it's a tenant-led or end-user-led process. And I don't think that continental Europe or Spain will be able to protect themselves against what I see as something that is probably a necessary change.
The tenant is the boss, basically.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
That's a good summary.
Good summary, thank you.
And I think also you look at the change in corporate demand now, and the big occupiers of space. And by the way, what we do in the flexible workspace sector, engaging in that relationship, needs to happen at the other end as well. That no longer can you have an absent landlord. Landlords on a very large scale need to have a different kind of relationship with their occupiers. And part of it is because the corporate occupier is saying, well, I need to attract the right kind of talent to my business, and I need to economically, I can reduce my core space because I can bolt on flex space. And then you look at sort of the dynamics of the work environment. And there's an example in London where Deloitte, and this is going back a couple of years, but Deloitte had a city building, glass and steel, and they took for their digital team in Clerkenwell a very beautiful converted warehouse building just for that team. And what happened is all the meeting rooms in that building were oversubscribed by everybody in the city, because everybody in the city wanted to work there. So there's this need for everybody who wants to sort of work in a more considered environment. When our market, WeWork's market, and others used to be the much smaller businesses. Those businesses, as our audience now becomes companies that are taking space with us for their long-term need, those companies therefore get bigger. And then when we fill a building with smaller businesses but more established companies, the bigger occupiers are saying, I need to be there too. I need to be around that. And if I'm trying to attract the same kind of employees, I need to take space there because I want them to share in that environment and in that community element. And by the way, the community is such an important piece, but is not the reason why people come to these buildings. It is a very happy consequence and a positive knock-on effect of being in that space, but it is not the reason.
But it may be the reason why they stay. I think there's a stickiness. There's a stickiness to creating an environment where people are happy to go, and where they do meet up with a community of people that from all diverse boards. And I think that's getting the long past are the times when I think you sign a lease. you disappear for the duration of the lease, and you come back a few months before the end to renegotiate it. That sort of landlord, I think, is not going to go very much further. I think today you need to be interfacing with your tenant, and that's why this whole facilities management, office workspace management is key, because that is the people on the ground who every day are interacting, and they need to create that community to get the stickiness of the tenants.
It's so true. I think for so long the real estate market has been all about attracting the tenant. All you have to focus on is attract the tenant, sign them up to the lease, and forget about them, and rely on CBRE. I think there are others. CBRE to manage, to manage the building, to collect the rent. And the landlord doesn't have to worry about it. Now the landlord has to worry about keeping those tenants.
Yeah. Should we maybe, there's something that we haven't discussed, and I think it's embedded in both the occupational strategies and the Capex strategies, which is everything that has to do with sustainability, which is already an old word. I mean, that's a given. Maybe the wellness part of it. So how are you as landlords, Tina and Luis, and as people also attracting and managing the spaces for you, Charlie, how are you implementing this wellness / sustainability in your strategies?
So, for us, from the very beginning when we started the business, because we owned the assets, we bought all of our assets at the beginning. That allowed us to do things in terms of sustainability that sometimes you can't do when you lease a building. So our principles, I think, are well established, and it's the thing about sustainability is that this is not a tree-hugging endeavor. Sustainability has a commercial benefit. It's such a positive connotation to a building. It's such a good story that anybody who can vicariously benefit from that story. So that if we deliver a building and we have green roofs and solar panels, photovoltaics, rainwater harvesting, and we can deliver those, I mean, I have to tell you that I don't subscribe to BREEAM or any of the other sort of certification unless I have to because of planning. But I do it anyway because it's good for business and it's good for the planet. And those two things go hand. They're no longer, I think they used to be exclusive, right? Now I think they go hand in hand. If you deliver a sustainable building, it makes it more marketable. We're just about to build it was going to be the largest commercial timber building in London. Now it's like third biggest, which is really annoying.
It's a fast market.
It's a fast market, but still, we do it because it's a great thing. And if there's a good PR story, that's brilliant. If the occupiers of our buildings are coming to us and they can tell their clients they're in a green building, it's brilliant. So wherever we can, we try and be as sustainably, we put in as many initiatives as we can.
As you can.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Sustainability is almost become mainstream. We can't think about carrying out a new development or refitting or repositioning a building without integrating sustainability credentials. And I think what's really interesting is that today there are more and more prop tech initiatives in sustainability and energy savings and water savings, in analyzing your consumption, the ability to follow your tenants around, how they use the building, how can we make the building more efficient from both a resource standpoint and a space standpoint. All of those things are participating to making sustainability and wellness part and parcel of the way the building is managed as well as developed. And I think that the upside when it's harnessed well, because it's not easy, there's a lot of things going on. So choosing which system, which app, which provider to work with is delicate. But when it's harnessed well, it means that you've got a building that's using big data and AI and churning out reports and making decisions based on criteria that you have set as being where you want to be. And that means that the facility manager, the property manager, workspace manager is able to focus on providing the human side of the service, and we've got the technical side being run by a lot of very, very innovative systems. So I think that that's part of where we see at the RICS the future heading and embracing those technologies.
Totally agree with my colleagues and my mates. The problem in the long term probably will, from the point of view of the sustainability, will be the pollution. With the new size of the cities like Mexico, El Cairo, and the Chinese cities, the problem is how to clean the air that we are creating in our big cities. Cities more than 30 million population. And there is a new technology, obviously there's sun panels, but there is a new technology that we call clean tower. Torres que limpian el aire. So basically it's a high-rise tower that at the top has a turbine. The turbine produces a vacuum system in the inside chimney of the tower. It means that there is a flow of air from the bottom of the tower to the top of the tower. And there are filters that are located inside the tower, and the turbine provides electrostatic charge that attract the dust of the CO2 to these filters. So basically we are cleaning the airflow system, and we expel it at the top of the tower, clean air. So this is not the future. This is under construction in China, and the project is an English architect that was awarded in an event in Chicago, and it could be the solution for the pollution. But we're talking about the sustainability in the next 30 years, but we need requirements to solve the problems in the next 5 years, that are the sun panels, solar panels, new system, wellness, something like this. But the problem is that we have to preview the forecast for the next 30 years, because if we are solving the sustainability only for the short time, we are not solving the problem. So we are repairing or revamping the problem, but we are not solving in the long term, you know? So we have to think in the long term.
Which I think is something that it's typical from our industry. So we're a short-sighted industry. Usually investors' plans are 7-year cash flow, so it's difficult, and maybe it has to do with what you commented before about smart cities and new models of cities. So how are we implementing that mid-term, I wouldn't say even long, no, mid-term view into the Capex and the strategies that we implement
you know,
now?
because you can, in the Capex, from some buildings, you can introduce the measurements that my colleagues has mentioned, you know. Smart cities requires the digitalization of all big data, business intelligence, science, blockchain, something like that. But this is smart cities. But the new models of the cities affect the master plan of the city, because if you are creating a new city, I mean in China, so the new cities in China are 8 million population. So if you are not introducing right now it, you are in troubles in 10 years or in 30 years. But that's true that the problem that we have is what could we do with cities like Paris, Mexico, London, so that the only solution...
Already existing cities.
Yeah, that pre-existing buildings, you know. Sometimes it's possible with the Capex to solve these kind of problems, but sometimes it's really impossible, basically for the master plan of the city. That's why in London they are analyzing project by project. So they are not applying just the order or rules of the municipal authorities. So they say, if you submit to this city hall a project that is really interesting, we are not considering the buildable area or the rules of the height of the building. No. If you are submitting a really interesting project, we can consider, because we understand that is the good solution or the best solution for the city, you know?
I've been including some of the questions of the audience in what we've discussed. I don't know if there's someone from the floor who wants to ask a question without the app, just the traditional way. ¿Alguna pregunta para los panelistas? No? Okay, then we will go and just make sure, in case you do, just let us.
Just to touch on the kind of the wellness and the sustainability a little bit more. So we're investing, the technology that we're investing now covers many areas, from sort of our billing software and our platforms and our CRM and our digital channels, But the intelligent buildings that we're trying to create is about learning the data, how people use those buildings, which then informs the sustainability so that we can control, we know peak times, then we need to sort of adjust our air conditioning and quiet times and control it as well. So we develop the tech to control it. But that's sort of on a, this really interesting sort of on a much bigger scale, and then you drill it to the individual, because the technology for us is as you mentioned, that human level. How do you deploy it to create this human level? And we talked earlier about wellness and how does that play its role as part of the user experience within the buildings? And some of that is really, really simple stuff, and some of that doesn't need technology. Some of that is about natural ventilation, natural light. When you offer food in your buildings, that it's nutritious and healthy and good food, and you have a gym facility that is not just a running machine in a basement. And really, one of the things challenges that we have as a business is to be generous as we can be with the space, to give those facilities to the people in the office space. And that sacrifice is quite a hard thing to do, because it's economically, it's financially, it's tough. You're losing income producing space, but it's so valuable in generating the income from the office space that you have. In fact, it's not valuable, it's fundamental that you have to have those elements. So the wellness of the individuals, and we look at, of course, the companies are making decisions to be in our space, but in order to convince them to take space with us, everything we do is thinking about what the individuals that they employ, what their experience is going to be, and wellness plays a key role in that.
Thank you for that. I think I'm getting signals that because we're stepping over the official inauguration with all the important people. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the panelists. Big thank you to you. Very interesting group. We'll see you around at the fair. Thank you.